Guara, guara, quinto ya. All right, everybody, welcome to this On2 Salsa Musicality webinar. This is the third episode in our webinar series. All that footage that you just saw was footage that I shot during our recent trip, our dance study trip to Cuba, and it's called Sabrosón Cultural Adventures. We go every year to Cuba to study the roots of salsa. So if you're interested in that, let me know. I'll put some links in the description for you. So this webinar that we're going to do today is all about On2 body mechanics. And this is basically how we prepare our bodies for the time steps that we're going to learn, which is in our last episode is going to be about all the different On2 time steps that are available to us right now. So if you did miss any of the previous webinar episodes, just let me know and I can give you a link to those so that you can watch them. I'll also put the links inside of the description below. So let's just do a recap of the previous webinar. In the previous webinar, we talked about the essential music theory for On2 salsa dancing. And we really incorporated the concept of the fusion between European and African music concepts. And we really talked about some of the specific music theory concepts that are important to know when it comes to On2 musicality. And then we also talked about how to apply these music theory concepts into our social dancing. So if you haven't watched that episode, check that episode out so you can really get a context of what we're going to talk about next, which is all about our On2 body mechanics. So what we're going to talk about with our body mechanics, we're going to talk about four main things. We're going to talk about contrary body motion. We're going to talk about the gait cycle and what I call the Afro-Latin gait. We're going to talk about the lower body mechanics, and we're going to talk about the upper body mechanics. All these things are important when it comes to On2 so that we really can get into the movement aesthetic that is essential for On2 dancing. And this is something that's important because it's not just about the steps, right? It's about how the steps are incorporated into the body movement, which brings the whole picture together. So just a little bit about me for anybody who doesn't know about me. My name is Musa. I'm a dancer, I'm an educator, and I'm a musician. So that really gives me an advantage when sharing this information because I can see from these three different lenses that are important when it comes to learning concepts about musicality and especially On2 salsa. So I'm excited to share this information with everybody. And I really promise everybody that if you go through my courses on On2, that you will not only refine your On2 salsa, but you'll master it more quickly because my approach is an integrated approach. It really involves every aspect of how to get On2. It really fills in the gaps of what's usually left out in classes. So and I do this through what I call the elemental movement model. And this is a model that I use to train dancers to really build their skill level, from beginner to intermediate to advanced to professional. This is a framework that's really effective that I use to build dancer skills, especially social dancers. And what I do, the main thing I focus on in this model is foundation. It's really building the foundation within dancers so that when they grow in their movement journey, they grow well-rounded dancers. And how I do that is I really focus on culture, musicality, and mechanics. And this is something that a lot of these concepts are left out when it comes to, when you get into a class as a beginner. A lot of the times the classes go straight to the steps and they leave out the musicality, they leave out the cultural context. And this creates a big disadvantage to people who really want to grow their skill level within these Afro-Latin styles of dances such as salsa. So let's get right into it. And if you stay to the end of this webinar, I do have a special offer for everybody who stays to the end. We are opening our On2 Salsa Accelerator course in July. So if you stay to the end, you will get a special offer for this new course that we're offering to really help dancers master their On2 abilities. Okay, so let's get right into the content section of this webinar, and I'll see you on the other side. Learning On2 salsa, and I really don't like to leave this out, but a lot of the times it gets left out in classes and in lessons because it's sort of like an extra thing to teach, an extra thing to learn. But I feel like it's a very important concept to learn because it really brings the flavor and the essence behind the moves, which is so important. And the first time I heard about body mechanics is with Eddie Torres. So I got to give props to Eddie Torres for him mentioning the concept of contrary body motion. And contrary body motion goes beyond the basic step. It goes into how to enrich the basic step and how to align the basic step with the aesthetics of the specific dance involved. Which, when we're talking about salsa movements, they have a specific kind of body aesthetic that makes it look correct, that makes it look like it's in resonance with where it came from. So when we talk about contrary body motion, we're going to talk about three main things. One is the oppositional body tension that's happening within the body. So the different isolations between the lower and the upper half of the body, also within the shoulders and the torso, there's a lot of tension going on that's creating this oppositional body effect. And this tension is paramount to what we call contrary body motion. Another thing that we're going to talk about is the contrast between European and African body movement aesthetics. And this has to do with how different parts of the body are valued in different perspectives and different lenses. So from the European styles of dance and movement, you have a different form of body movement aesthetics, what's valued and what's brought to the forefront. Then in African body aesthetics, you have another form where other styles and other movements are valued. So this is so important to get into before we get into the basic steps, so that our bodies can feel the essence of the dance as we step into our basic time steps. So one thing that is very interesting that has to do with this body mechanics is what's called the human gait cycle. And the human gait cycle is important to understand because when it comes to salsa, the human gait cycle, the natural way that we walk in our human gait cycle, it changes a little bit. And one of the main ways that it changes is how we contact the floor with our feet. So if you look at this picture shows the basic description of the main phases within the human gait cycle. And the human gait cycle usually starts with contact right here, and it starts with the heel. So this is called a heel strike. And if you watch anybody walk, if you're observant to how people walk, you'll see that they usually walk like this. Not 9 out of 10% of people initiate their walking step with a heel strike. And then their heel goes down to mid stance, and then the leg switches to the swing phase and into propulsion into the next step. So now the different thing though between what I call the Afro-Latin gait, and this is a term that I'm using to describe the intricacies of what the body's doing in salsa dancing and other Afro-Latin styles of dances. I call it the Afro-Latin gait. And the Afro-Latin gait, we actually don't start with the heel strike. We actually start with what's called a ball roll. And we're going to go into all the intricacies of the Afro-Latin gait when it comes to the lower body motion as well as the upper body motion and all the specific focus points in between, the tension points within the joints that makes the body have that contrary body motion, that essence of salsa that everybody knows and distinguishes, as it has a certain type of flavor, a certain type of sabor, a certain type of feel to it, a certain essence that really signifies the signature of On2 salsa dancing and salsa dancing in general. So some of the main points that we're going to talk about here are going to be the feet, the knees, the hips, the torso, the shoulders, and the head. These are all points that are going to have energy flowing through them, that are going to have different kinds of isolations. And all of these points will contribute to the whole of how you create your own Afro-Latin gait. So let's start first with the African movement aesthetics, because we have to remember that the Afro-Latin gait is a combination of African movement aesthetics and European movement aesthetics. And this is what makes the Afro-Latin gait so unique, because it fuses these two approaches to how movement is valued within the body. So if we start with the African movement aesthetics, let's think about traditional African dances and what is common between a lot of them. And if we take a look at traditional African dances, if we really observe the body movement and the body mechanics, we can see a common thread of certain things that are occurring within the body. So if we take note of these things, we can start to see how this is incorporated into the Afro-Latin gait or the body mechanics within salsa. One of the first things is a low center of gravity. You can see a lot of traditional African dances, they have a low center of gravity. Their feet are wide apart, their knees are flexed, and they're really using the tension from the earth, from their feet connected to the earth. They're really using and absorbing that tension and pushing off of the earth a lot. Another thing is within African movement aesthetics is range of motion. There's a lot of movement going on, a lot of range of movement with the arms, with the legs, with the feet. Things are moving in big degrees, you know. And the last thing within African movement aesthetics is its free form structure. And when I talk about free form structure, I don't mean necessarily that they do whatever they want to do when it comes to African movement aesthetics, but there is an aspect to African movement aesthetics that involves improvisational movement and movement that is sort of inspired. So I would call that a free form structure. So now let's look at some of the European movement aesthetics. When we look at the European movement aesthetics, if we look at traditional European dances, we can see similar threads of movement signatures that are involved within that. And if we translate that into salsa, we can see that this is also incorporated. So one of the main things, the three main things incorporated within European movement aesthetics are a raised center of gravity. So this is opposite of the African movement aesthetics, which has more of a lower center of gravity. The European movement aesthetics really lifts off the ground, almost takes flight, and it's always the center of gravity is always rising in some sense. Another thing within European movement aesthetics is the importance of posture and frame. You see a lot of the framing with the alignment of the body and the alignment of the arms and holding postures and holding frames. That's something that's very visible within a lot of traditional European dances. One of the last things is a rigid structure. And rigid structure usually refers to forms and figures within dance. So you'll see a lot of the European styles of dance have different types of forms and different types of figures that are predetermined, that are choreographed, and where you have to keep your movement within that rigid structure. Okay, so let's bring this all together, and I want to show you an example of the Afro-Latin gait in motion with one dancer here. And when I show you this video, I'm going to show you this video without music because I want you to focus just on the body movement, and I want you to see if you can notice the two different movement aesthetics working together within one body. I want you to see if you can notice how from the lower body, you can see that lower center of gravity. And I want you to see if you can notice from the upper body, from the hips up, you can see that sense of form, structure, posture, and a little bit of rigidity. So check this video out and see if you can sense these two things within this body movement. Okay, perfect. So now let's go back to our Afro-Latin gait and let's go and really talk about the specific areas of the Afro-Latin gait, the elements of the Afro-Latin gait that make it work, that really bring all the pieces together within the body. And we're going to start from the ground up. So the first thing we want to talk about is the feet and what the feet are doing, because the feet are actually doing something very specific when it comes to our basic time step in salsa. The feet are executing what's called a ball roll, and a ball roll is different from the heel strike, right? From the natural way of the human gait cycle, the way people naturally walk, they begin their stride with a heel strike. Their heel strikes the ground first. But when it comes to Afro-Latin gait, when it comes to the Afro-Latin gait in salsa dancing, you'll see people don't do heel strike, because if you heel strike, all the energy from the floor dissipates quickly and you can't absorb it, you can't generate the tension. So what dancers do when they do their Afro-Latin gait is they do a ball roll. And what the ball roll does is it allows you to generate tension from the floor that you can use to regulate up into your body to create the contrary body motion. So that's the first contact with the floor, is this ball rolling, which starts from the ball of the foot and then rolls down to the heel, right? The next one is the knees. And the knees are very important when it comes to our Afro-Latin gait, because the knees can regulate our center of gravity. The way that we bend our knees and keep our knees flexed can really help to regulate our gravity and our tension with the floor that's coming from our feet, and to lower our center of gravity. The next thing is the hips. The hips are the crucial point within the Afro-Latin gait, because the hips are the main transition period between the lower and the upper body. This is why the hips are so important. And the hips basically act to regulate the tension, all the tension that's being generated from the feet and the knees. The hips will regulate that tension into the upper part of the body, so that we can have that tension and use that tension within our torso, within our shoulders, our arms, our chest, and even our head. So the hips are very important. And the way that the hips are structured, that ball and socket design that we have on our hips, it really allows for a specific kind of isolation that can regulate the energy very effectively. The next part that we're going to talk about is the torso. And the torso is interesting because it sort of balances upon the plane of the hips. So if you look at the hips, we can see that the hips create sort of like a bowl, you know. You have, and then you have the top plane of the bowl. Now the torso is going to balance and stabilize in a lateral motion. That's the torso has a lateral motion with its isolation on top of the plane of the hips. And this adds a certain kind of interesting effect when it comes when the torso starts to move laterally like that while the hips are regulating the tension. This really creates an effect that is interesting and is contrasting that's happening within the body. Okay, so all these together create the effect of the Afro-Latin gait when it comes to the feet and the ball rolling and the tension regulation within the floor. Then when it comes to the knees and regulating that tension from the floor, keeping the low center of gravity, generating even more tension like that. Then when it comes to the hips, regulating that tension inside the core, the center part of the body, up into the upper half of the body, and then into our torso, which acts as that connection point that will isolate our arms and shoulders and our chest. So you can see how all these aspects work together to create what we call the Afro-Latin gait. So thank you everybody for listening, for paying attention, to checking out this edition in our On2 Salsa Webinar Series. So let's just recap of what we talked about. So we talked about contrary body motion. We talked about the human gait cycle. We talked about the Afro-Latin gait. We talked about African body aesthetics, European body aesthetics, and the main body centers that are in effect when it comes to contrary body motion. So thank you for everybody who stayed, and whoever stayed, I want to offer you this special offer in our On2 Salsa Accelerator course that we're starting in July. If you stay to the end, then you are very interested in improving your On2. So I really encourage you to take this offer up. This is a course that usually is valued at $1,200 for the top tier. And I'm giving all of this to you for $99, only for a testimonial. If you leave me a testimonial, you get all of this for $99. So thanks again. And our On2 webinar series for next week will be about our On2 time steps. And this is the meat of On2 salsa. This is what everybody wants to learn, and usually what people learn first, which we actually take a different approach, and we build the foundation, and then we come to the time steps, which makes it much easier to integrate the time steps into the body. So if you're interested in this, check out next week, our last episode in this On2 Salsa webinar series. Thanks again, everybody.